Hello everybody, it's Matthew or Meachew or Peach. I'm going to be reacting to some videos. Sorry I sound tired. It's because I am, but it's early in the morning. It's like almost 3:30 a.m. So, and I might get bored, so depending on how it goes. Also, I have some stuff playing in the background. I have a fireplace, lo-fi, a blizzard, some snow, just because sometimes I get kind of bored with, like, I'll probably get bored after a while, and sometimes I'll run out of things to talk about. But anyway, the first one is 9 of the creepiest video game hacks, bootlegs and mods by Blame It On George. So, let's get started. Cause look how many videos I am going to attempt to watch. So, yeah, let's get this started without further ado.
After completing a game, some players decide that the only thing to do next is to relive the adventure. But these guys decided to take matters into their own hands.
Okay, full screen is
of these games,
better.
And some for profits, but all unusually creepy and weird. So today,
You know what's crazy? I have like 4 video games. 4 videos playing right now at the same time. Luckily, thankfully, I have good internet, so it's not going to be that's a good thing.
Unlike others on this list, the game is very similar to its original counterpart. The player has to choose between Simba, Timon, or Pumbaa to go on a quest to defeat the boss of each level. The 3 characters each have different
It's not a bad thing.
Like Simba is the balanced character, Timon is slow on land but can swim for the longest, and Pumbaa is the fastest and can ram enemies.
Yeah, you know, this is going pretty well.
The difference is improved graphics, new levels, and the game over screen. If the player were to lose all their lives, the game over screen would pop up, showing their character committing suicide, albeit in a non-graphic pixelated way.
I don't know why more people don't they don't put like lo-fi or like ambience in the background.
Another example of a bootleg game with a creepy ending is one known as Felix the Cat. The developer of this game is
because I think lo-fi and fireplace ambience and snow goes so well with reaction videos, and the reason why is because they're relaxing, they're not too distracting. I'm pretty sure they increase concentration, and that's not the only reason why, but it's also because that the music actually heightens your focus. And this is due to the beats and rhythm that lo-fi, chill hop, synthwave, vaporwave, and all that stuff.
Replaces all the dragons' faces with renditions of Macho Man Randy Savage.
I hope
sounds like Macho Man Randy Savage when
the people who I'm reacting to don't have
turning all of the Deathclaws into, you guessed it,
like a big fit about
Randy
it.
Savage.
Number 7, Earthbound.
Toby Fox is a music producer and game developer, known for creating the popular game Undertale. Before that, Most of his early work
Okay,
was
so
with the
Undertale,
Rom-Hacks,
Deltarune,
including
Earthbound,
one known as the
all
Halloween
were
Hack.
inspired by each
Ness is
other.
completely absent from the story, and it instead stars a character named Barrett. After learning about the murder of a girl's parents, our hero sets off to find whoever is responsible. While the game looks like a proper Earthbound game, it is coated with black comedy and an overall darker tone. The dialogue from some of the NPCs would be pretty distasteful. One guy had to stand
That
next
was
to his
kind of
son
loud.
because of his OCD, or else he would kill someone.
You know, I'm
Next, we
sitting
talk
with the
about
lights
Snorting
off, and it's
Mustard
pretty
and how she had to
it's pretty
shank a
comfortable.
bitch, if you know what I mean. Hacks.leros.net described it as the most descriptive, shocking,
Hacks.
and most psychologically warping game you will ever play. This game isn't your average Halloween game. Its content is comparable to games like
Okay,
Silent
so,
Hill
and
Yu Meachew.
sometimes I
This game
wonder
also has the
why
added
I don't
effect of
like
making
pause
you
the video.
depressed as you play. Counting real
I
games
just
as
don't
fan
want
games,
to,
this could be one
and
of the
I
most
feel
dramatic
like
and horrifying
so many
games
other
in the world. And we're not joking.
so many other
This
reaction
is one of
channels
the
do
most
it.
disturbing hacks to
They'll
come out.
like
Well,
pause it
ever, really.
and give their own opinion on it, but I've seen most of the videos.
They hunger,
I've seen this one a lot.
paranoia.
This one is
The
actually
Netflix
kind of
series has
hard to
spawned
find
countless mods,
because
some of which have
uh,
been made into actual
either
games by
YouTube
Valve.
either hides it or
This mod,
Blame
known
It
as
on
They
George
Hunger,
doesn't want it to be
was made
seen,
in 2001 and was one of the first really popular
which I guess is
mods.
fair, but
It's broken into 3 parts or chapters,
I personally
focusing on a small
don't
American town in the
mind it too
1950s.
much.
You are
What
an
is
author
this?
who moves into a new
Half-Life?
town looking to get inspiration
You know,
for your new
Half-Life
book.
was
The land is then
I'm pretty
populated
sure it's
with
a
undead
a
zombies,
Counter-Strike
and it's
mod,
up to
or the
you to
count
survive.
or
Every
Counter-Strike is a
chapter
mod from
starts with the player
Half-Life,
being
and
completely
Half-Life
stripped of all weapons, forcing
was
them
the
to start
reason
from
for
scratch.
Cry of Fear and
Resources are scarce.
Afraid of
Sometimes
Afraid
there's
of
not even
Monsters,
enough
which
bullets
is
to
cool.
stop
In
all
fact,
the
Afraid of
swarm of
Monsters,
undead coming at you. Gameplay is very
pretty sure you
similar to
need
Half-Life.
Half-Life to even play
Despite
the
featuring very
game,
little
because
original
it's
Half-Life
basically
content, besides the
it's
revolver,
not just
some
like
sound clips and
a mod
ammunition.
as in it's standalone
Another
game.
mod
It's
worth
a
mentioning is one called
basically
Paranoia.
DLC or an
You play
add-on.
as a Russian soldier
It looks
tasked
pretty
with
fun, though.
neutralizing a terrorist
So
organization.
I might
However,
play through
a
Half-Life.
zombie outbreak occurs and wipes out your entire team, forcing you to survive
So it's
on
pretty
your own.
cool. This is
The atmosphere this
Half-Life
game
They
gives
Hunger.
off is unsettling and
Pretty
thick
sure.
with tension, forcing the player to fight his way in abandoned labs and buildings.
I like the aesthetics of these games,
Ghosted 2.
but
Ghosted 2 is a
I don't
mod
know,
of the
I'm
classic
kind
game
of a
due
nerd.
to Hell on Earth. It's a sequel to the first mod with improved graphics, textures, and even more ghosts.
so
The
what is
gameplay
this?
style
Ghosted
is
2?
heavily inspired by Slender the Eight Pages, as you're placed in a abandoned
Okay.
building, and you have to locate a number of pages while avoiding attacks from ghouls. The game has a nice variety of locations, such as apartments, hospitals, crypts, and archaeological sites, and so on. Not all
So-
attacking ghouls are the same. Sometimes it's a hooded creature to look out for, and other times it's a skeleton figure.
Wait, so
Interestingly,
Ghosted
console
2.
played this game as
It looks like it has the
multiplayer
Doom,
experience,
the
which
Doom
can
guy.
make the
No, this is on the
whole
Doom
time a lot
engine.
more enjoyable and completable.
You know, my favorite Doom game is Doom 64.
Pokemon.
That Doom
Escape from
64 is
Town.
it's very
The game was
underrated.
created by a man named
I'm guessing a lot of
Meachew,
people don't
who
like
was
it is
inspired by
because
the
it
Lavender Town
some of
center
it was
creepypasta.
frankly
The goal of the game is
too
to
dark,
escape Lavender
and
Town. You can still move around and talk
a
to
lot of people
residents.
didn't like it because of
However,
that. The other
you
one
can't
is
walk
it's
into the next
it was a
town or
lot
anywhere else.
slower
You
paced
have to
than
find a different way.
the
Closing the game with the
it's a lot
escape key
slower
doesn't
paced
work
than the
as well,
original ones.
since the game will just reopen itself. When it does, the game
So
will read the
apparently
story.
now we're looking at
Colors will change.
Pokemon.
Images will on screen,
uh,
the Lavender Town music will begin to play.
Pokemon, yeah, it's called
Clues for
Lavender
escaping will
Town.
flash up on screen.
Apparently it
These
caused
set
children
across
to
headings, feelings
want
of
to commit
depression,
suicide
and
due to
nightmares.
I guess due
The Legend of Zelda,
to the
Nicolas
tones.
Cage edition.
Holy crap, I can't
Based on the already
talk.
creepy game Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask.
But
This
yeah,
game
that's
features
basically it.
almost all of the faces,
I don't know what to
masks,
think
items,
about it.
and
I don't
sometimes
really
even the
care
randomness of textures
either
as Nicolas
because
Cage, including
I don't
his
know,
face
people
and
have a
shield.
right
The
to
fairies
go
are
away,
Nicolas
which
Cage.
I
Some of the
almost
characters
did.
like the Tingle Fairy and Romani are
I
Nicolas
didn't
Cage. The sun is
yet.
Nicolas Cage, and yes, even the moon is
The law
Nicolas
die
Cage.
one day,
There are random
maybe.
posters of Nicolas Cage throughout Clocktown. Tattle and Tales
In
drawings
some
that have
ways.
Nicolas Cage, and the water ripples
So
are
we're
Nicolas
looking
Cage,
at
and a
now
whole lot more.
apparently a Majora's Mask
After months of
hack,
uncomfortable work, the
and
Nicolas Cage texture
there's
pack for
basically
Majora's Mask is finally
nothing.
finished,
Well,
says YouTube user
a lot of
Criken2,
things are
one of
just
the two modders behind
Nicolas
this game.
Cage.
Why make this, you may ask?
It's kind
I wish I
of
had an answer for you. The truth is, Full Monty and I lost the luxury
strange,
of
but
free will as soon as we began working on this project.
yeah,
We had no
maybe
goal,
it's not too bad.
only Cage.
Super Mario World,
So
Dawn of Cthulhu.
now,
The Super Mario Bros. Series is one of the most well-known, yet simple games in the history of gaming. As such, many fans have created their own versions and mods of the playful little
dude, the frame rate
adventures
looks like it's
of
running
Super
at
Mario Bros.
15 miles, 15 FPS per
Super
second.
Call of Cthulhu, which is loosely inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's short story, The Call of Cthulhu. This hack
Ooh,
game is
H.P.
pretty short in
Lovecraft,
comparison to its
okay.
origin, only lasting 6 levels. Visually, however, the game thrives in creativity, redesigning most of the enemies, items, and levels into a beautifully bizarre and
Look at the
sadistic rendition.
sun.
The game features some new items and enemies, like this floating gray cat and whatever that bat looks like.
I'll probably talk a little bit
The new
more
level designs
when
give
the
a
other
complete
videos
dystopian
come up.
tone. Almost everything is at night, and platforms that float randomly throughout the air.
Alright,
And have the oddest shapes too. Sometimes they would even
I'm
be
not going anywhere.
or in black and white.
I'm just adjusting.
The game ends with Mario traveling in this bloody reddish level with eyes and purple organs.
I gotta get
He then
comfortable.
arrives at a tomb where he fights with a malevolent entity who wants to feed Mario to Cthulhu. After Cthulhu awakens, Mario's face is shown, disturbed and mortified. The two then fight, and Mario manages to defeat the Lord of Evil.
Lord of
Frozen
Evil, huh?
bootlegs. In 2013, Disney released a movie that many people now consider the start of their second Renaissance era, Frozen. For those who don't know, Disney's Renaissance era was a time in the 90s when the Walt
Let's
Disney
do
Animation Studio was releasing hit after hit after hit film. Every movie was a critical and commercial success. In the 2000s, Disney wasn't doing as well. The movies just weren't as great, and they were facing some fierce competition from the rising DreamWorks Animation Studios. But with Frozen, Big Hero 6,
Disney's
and
not
recently
doing
Zootopia,
so well now.
Disney seems to be back on track. So how could the bootleg artists leech off of Disney's success?
What you
Well,
talking about,
there's
Willis?
Elsa's Frozen Brain Surgery, a game that lets you cut through Elsa's bald head and cut out rocks and accessories. Next is Elsa's Toilet
Oh, I
Decoration,
thought that was her,
which
like,
lets you
mouth
do
at
exactly what it
first.
sounds like. Spank Elsa Butts, which I'm not even gonna show. Elsa's Throat Doctor, Elsa's Throat Surgery, Elsa
I'm not,
and a
like,
Vampire
surprised, though.
Resurrection, and probably worst of all,
Elsa,
Frozen
Elsa.
Anna give birth a baby.
And this is why I kind of have. It's why I have something in the background. Because it's just too boring. Well, I mean the video's not, but like
Hey, it's me.
Okay. Well, that's gonna be turned down a little. So this is Marut, huh? It's Marut. Let's see, what is it? It's Marut and Dalcore. Yeah. Okay. Something I like about the aesthetics here is that I've always liked the aesthetics for a couple of reasons. One, it gives me a lot of, like, well, how do I put this? It gives me a lot of, kind of gives me a nostalgic vibe. And the reason why this is good is because it gives me, it's so wholesome and stuff. So I figured that I think a lot of it is good. Oh, that was quick. that was quick as heck. Quick as heck. Alright, is that nothing but a black screen? Okay, we'll listen to it anyway. Like, why would I get off of the screen anyway? Also, I reacted, like, I've seen AI videos up close, and most things in, like, life just don't bother me or scare me. I think a lot of that is I'm just very, I don't know, as I've said in other videos, I'm just kind of laid back and reserved, and it's like, well, yeah, either something bad is going to happen to you, or it isn't, and it's like, well, you're going to die, it's not, it's probably going to be pretty fast, and then you'll be with Jesus, and so, and plus I've already attempted, as I've said before, there isn't much reason to be afraid of. Like, a lot of people in life, they seek validation, they seek all this stuff about validation from others, when really life, I think, is about a couple of simple things. How you behave and how you treat others. If you can justify your beliefs that are consistent, non-biased, and if, so that goes with politics, that goes for theology as well. Okay, let's turn it up a little. I believe this is 100 liminal space images compilation. I think that's a little bit better now. I do like the music, the ambient music. I'll turn it down a little, maybe halfway. Well, almost halfway. Oh yeah, so as I was going to talk about before, as I so rudely interrupted myself, what was I saying? Oh, so as I said before, life's about basically a couple of things that it's just about if you can, if you can justify your claims and assertions without having the need to, if you can, for example, dang, I've lost my train of thought. Sorry, sometimes it keeps happening. I don't mean to do that, but it's like, dude, my brain's kind of fried. But perhaps I'm thinking too hard. Oh yeah, politics and religion, I think they could kind of go hand in hand. A lot of political people and a lot of religious people, they can't justify their own beliefs without going into contradictions, circulation, which everything is because a presupposition, if you have any worldview at all, you basically have to go into presubs. But a lot of people don't like the presupposition is because you then have to go into something called Agrippa's trilemma. But I've already gone to that before. I don't really want to go into it now, and I feel like it's kind of redundant to go into it. But life's about treat others how you want to be treated and treat yourself well. Life's about being able to justify and just to give your justification for your claims, assertions, politics, and religious people. I think many fell at this. The cosmological argument. I think tag is a better way because tag posits that people who claim the metaphysical doesn't exist, they will say that the mind exists, but they can't know that from their worldview because their worldview posits that you can't have knowledge claims, right? They give a lot of anecdotal stuff that doesn't really particularly, it's not coherent with the claims because it's not consistent. And a big example of this, well, one of the examples is that many people will say that, oh well, I can just claim God doesn't exist because you can't show me proof, you can't show me evidence. The issue with that whole claim in of itself is that the person who is trying to assert that God can't be real because they're not convinced or they don't have proof. They can't prove a lot of things. They can't prove that they exist. They can't prove that they themselves have free will. They can't prove that it's even them talking or making the arguments because they are making assertions assertions more than claims, and that may be good for some certain people, but it doesn't work here because the claim is unset. It's unsubstantiated, or it's unfalsifiable. The reason why it's unfalsifiable is because if you say the claim that God doesn't exist, you need to have proof to why you think that, but the whole issue here is that you can't actually know that God doesn't exist because you can't even know that what you're claiming is valid. So why did they just show the same thing twice? What the heck was that? That was weird. Anyway, it shows the same thing. So let me, because I've been watching some Jay Dyer and Andrew Wilson. I'm a Latter-day Saints, but I do respect the Orthodox a lot because I think they're more coherent. They say Jesus Christ is God, and they don't say that. They don't say the same God is the same God as Muslims and Jews, because I believe Jesus Christ is the God of Abraham, Yahweh of the Old Testament and New Testament. He's called Jehovah many times. He's the Word of God. God the Father calls Jesus Christ himself God. Even the LDS scriptures say he is the eternal God. So there is that a lot of people, they just don't, I don't know, I just don't think people know how to argue coherently. Even Christopher Hitchens, someone who many people say is the big atheist guy, more so than Matt Dillahunty or Sam Harris or any of those people, Richard Dawkins. So they all, I mean, I don't know. My brain's kind of toasted a little, but yeah. Let's see. Going back to the metaphysical thing, I went sidetracked. I kind of went off, but the reason why the argument that God doesn't necessarily work, because people believe in the metaphysical. They say the metaphysical can't exist, but then they use metaphysical statements and claims and stuff to then try to argue against the metaphysical, which is kind of nonsensical, which is weird. It's like, how can you argue against like the metaphysical while using the metaphysical? It's like you can't prove your mind exists. It's like just because you use something doesn't make that thing valid. That's like not the way that it works. It's like, okay, let's look at it another way. 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? 2 plus 2 equals 4. And so it's like if you have 2 plus 2 and 2 plus 2 equals 4. So 2 plus 2 equals 4. Even if let's say it's valid, right? So 2 plus 2 always equals 4. And if 2 plus 2 is always 4, how does that tell you, or you come to the conclusion that murder is wrong? It doesn't really work because you can say, oh, like, okay, so murder is, oh, so 2 plus 2 is is always 4. Even though that's more of the law of identity fallacy, it's like, okay, how do you know that 2 plus 2 always equals 4 if you're determined from cause and effect of the universe, or simulation theory, or evolution, or Buddhism, or anything that requires an external to exist or be something in some way means you're always going to be bound by it. And I think in many ways this has to do, yes, I'm going off in another tangent, but I don't know, I don't care. I'm just trying to talk about stuff to, I guess, sort of keep me talking and rambling somewhat, but I don't know. I'm kind of weird. So, if 2 plus 2 is always 4, which you kind of can't even know that it's legit. If 2 plus 2 is always 4, and we can verify it because we can say it works, although what works can be arbitrary, depending on multitude of factors, because all people dying can work too. You could get into why is all human existence good versus what's objectively wrong with all humans dying, and people will say, yeah, well, we want to survive because it's good for us. Okay, why is human survival good? And you have to go around in circles ultimately, because you can't give an objective justification as to why human survival is good versus human survival is bad. And people would just say it's good because it's in my preference. Well, your preference is just your preference, and if humans are animals or AI robots or maybe even God robots or anything else, like, or Buddha and Hinduism, Buddhism more likely says we were just here. Simulation theory says we were created. Evolution says we were created without a choice. Simulation theory says we were created without a choice. Buddhism says we were just here. Most beliefs, you need something external that you had no, and this is really the whole crux of the argument, is that if you didn't have a choice to exist, if you weren't asked to exist, and you were kind of forced to exist by something unknown, some unknown entity that you had no say in, are you really choosing? Do you really have free will if your free will is by the grace or necessity of others? Because most people, they didn't believe they never existed until becoming human. And the reason why I stay LDS Mormon, a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints follower, I stay one because a lot of people are not, I don't think mainstream Christianity can answer the reason to why an all-powerful and all-knowing being, which I do believe God is, how can an all-knowing and all-powerful being from God, even if I granted everything God does is good, which I do believe, but let's say for an internal critique, if I was Orthodox or a Catholic or any other person that, I came up to an LDS, or an LDS came up to me and said, hey, do you know how an all-powerful and all-knowing being that we never had a choice in to exist? How can we truly have free will if we're under the guide will of something else that we had no choice in, and then God creates us knowing what we would do because he's all-knowing. God would create his own creation. Then God would he would not only create us without a choice, God then would choose to blame us for essentially something he did, get angry at us, either throw us away or give us more to our own sin, or potentially what we want, which is weird because he's the one who set it up in the first place, so you've almost set it up to fail. And even if we say that you do have free will, do you have free will to be outside of God's knowledge and reigns? Now, I would say a lot of people say, well, you can't have free will like that. And it's like, you can. Maybe that's a criterion problem, but I would say you can still have free will with a God, because a free will with a God is not a lot different than having free will under evolution or simulation theory of Buddhism or Hinduism or Chinese religion or Gnosticism, where Gnostic claims God is basically unknowable, because God is basically an energy, which I don't find very much different from the universe, which is, again, if it's just cause and effect, then everything, your emotional problems, your preferences, your mental problems, the way you act, your animal instinct, it doesn't mean anything, because there's no morality, there's no objective reasoning, there's no justification without a giver who is both pragmatic and moral and can give an account and a justification that not only is consistent with itself, but can know things that don't basically fall into relativity. That's a big issue with a lot of beliefs. They don't know how to get out of the fallacy of relativity, and they just say, well, either I heard from this guy and this other guy heard it from God, so therefore this thing is true. And that's not the way it works at all. I think people could do that, but I don't think it's very substantial. I don't think it's very good. I just don't think it works the way people think. Okay, so now we're moving on to Dream Core. I've always liked Dream Core, Liminal Spaces, Weird Core, Marut, Nostalgic Core, Fruit Core Arrow, and many more. I like weird stuff like this, which is good. It's fine. So as I was saying before, as I lost my train of thought again, I keep doing it. All right, I'm gonna look on Twitter while I talk. Maybe watch some Jay Dyer stuff because I'm on my phone right now. So but I do have headphones in, so it won't interfere too much with this like the video clip because I'm getting more used to it. um. So yeah, as I was saying before, you know, what really helped me with argumentation is just how people can't they can't get out of the trap that that your existence requires something else for you to exist at all. And I think that's where the Latter day Saints Mormon church has the edge. I don't stay in it because of Joseph Smith necessarily, though I do think Joseph Smith is a big part. I stay in it because I think it's more logical than a lot of than the mainstream Christianity ones, even Orthodox, which I very much respect because I think Orthodox is they don't describe to the papacy, and then they don't have to deal with the shenanigans like, oh, well, the Pope says, the Pope is infallible, right? They say the Pope is infallible, but then that same Pope says Jews and Muslims and Christians all worship the same God. God is the word for Allah, but then people commit the word concept fallacy, and I don't think many people understand what they're doing wrong. The reason why the word concept fallacy doesn't actually work for them is because it's very simple. The word concept fallacy is that when people say God or Allah or just a name for God in general, they're being kind of generic. The word God can mean many different things to different people. It's the same thing with worship or a lot of different words because you need the proper context. Otherwise, it 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 just won't fly. And you just need the proper context of a word. Sorry, my phone, I accidentally vibrated it. I don't know. Well, actually, maybe I do. So as I said before, I think that the LDS theology is the best. I also think it's logically the most coherent and consistent. Oh, yeah, that reminds me. I was going to talk about how it also says that we also think in LDS theology, we also think that God didn't create the universe from nothing. Now, I sort of have my disagreements. I may be an LDS Church of Jesus Christ Mormon member, but I don't always agree with the leadership. I don't always agree with their interpretations, because for one, I think it can be an appeal to authority fallacy, which I don't like using. I don't like arguing with Joseph Smith or the scriptures, the LDS scriptures, the Pearl of Great Price, the Doctrine and Covenants, and Book of Mormon, is because you can call it's selected. It's called it's selection biased, and I feel like it would just it's an appeal to self-reference and self-relativity, which again, are fallacies. I don't think it's a good argument to say, well, we know it's true because not only did Joseph Smith get uh, visited by God the Father and Jesus Christ, God the Son, who is also the Son of God, and the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, which is kind of weird on itself because it's said in the Bible scriptures, or it alludes to the fact that we can't know nobody can see, nobody has seen God's true form, right? It's kind of like Cthulhu, but it's worse. Because God can't be fully comprehended, I don't think, in knowledge or understanding, it's kind of hard to say what God can and can't do. But going back to that, I just don't think, going back to the LDS thing, I don't think it's a good argument. And I think a lot of Latter-day Saints kind of mess up. The reason why they mess up a lot isn't because I don't think it's not valuable to have the belief system. It's just that it feels like many of them, they don't know how to argue without self-reference. And I think that's pretty bad because people can use their own justification, and you can justify basically anything for any reason, or even if you don't even have a reason, you can still justify it, and then it just becomes down to interpretation, which you can't know, even if you can't know that you're interpreting something correctly, not only because of the inability to essentially know things, if you're just determined from something else which you can't even know, so you can't unfalsify it. But it's even worse because now you are you're trying to take your presupposition and just say, well, I'm correct because all of these, because God, one day visited me, and He said that I can add more to Scripture. And a lot of people, I think rightly so, at times they think it's a cult, because many cults do seem to have relative with or similarities with Joseph Smith. And if you have similarities with Joseph Smith, and you say, well, look at me, I have, the full truth of the gospel, but nobody can, because the full truth, I believe, is just with Jesus and is Jesus, and so nobody can have the full truth. And in fact, this is impossible, even in the Latter-day Saint Mormon view, I believe, because for one, the Book of Mormon has missing pages. Two, you can't really say that God is bound by the universe or reality or logic if He Himself can define it and bypass it. For example, a lot of Latter-day Saints will just say, well, a square circle can't exist, a married bachelor can't exist. And for one, I just say I disagree somewhere. For one, if you say something, you cause it to exist, or be real, or be in truth in some way, I think. Otherwise, how would you be able to say it? Because the concept of something can exist even if you don't know what the concept itself might look like. For example, if you say a square circle doesn't exist in reality, because it's a logical contradiction. Well, for one, you can't know that because your mind is a finite, limited being, and it's like, well, how do you know that a square circle can't exist if you can't know everything that God knows? And reality is not only a big place, it probably has multiple alternative realities or dimensions that you can't even have access to, so you can't know for certain what God can or can't do because um, you're a finite, limited, arbitrary, relative human being that is a finite mind, and it's subject to things that even the mind or imagination can't come up with. That's why when people take DMT, they don't see stuff that they themselves either don't know or haven't seen. It's because there is a limit for, to what the human mind can conjure, can understand, even if the human mind can be taken to its utmost limit, and you can say, well, even if you say 2 plus 2 equals 4 in a way that is logically consistent, and you assert that, and you can appeal to consensus that because everybody says 2 plus 2 equals 4 and it works, 2 plus 2 must always equal 4. Therefore, 2 plus 2 equals 4 is valid because we all say it's valid. And you could say that is true because math is discovered, it's not really invented. I would just say that even if math is discovered and not invented, and I believe it's a universal construct, I think math, reality, universal, science, the unseen, the seen, God, I think all and more, all of those, the metaphysical, the mind, the imagination, the brain, dreams, alternate realities, the Atman, the Tao, the Way, among many more. I think it's all the same thing. I think math is, and science are, and reality are just aspects of God that is known to us. For example, I've always used the phrase, reality is just God. Reality is the brain of God making itself known for human beings to understand. Or reality as the mind of God make just limiting itself for human beings to understand. And I don't think anything is wrong with that. You know what? Maybe I'll put some Andrew Wilson and well, let's see. His best debates are probably against Skylar Diddley, Matt Dillahunty, and more because he just does internal critiques. But yeah, so I'm gonna watch that because I'm getting a little bit bored, kind of. Even with the lo-fi and fireplace and the what's it called? Blizzard, snow blizzard in the background. So, yeah. You can kind of hear the lo-fi in the background a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of my whole gist. I'm going to get into politics kind of quickly. Oh, my eyes are I'm starting to drift off, but I'll try to talk through it. In fact, this might help clear up my mind a little bit so that I can, you can take a power nap while getting some rest and then rejuvenate a little bit. So it forces you to become more relaxed but in a zone-like state. In fact, it might actually help clear up my head a little bit. So going into the politics things, so let's try to debunk this very quickly. People who say that societies were better back in the pagan days, Hellenist days, Viking days, ancient Greece and ancient Rome, while they do seem good on paper and many people have fond memories of those societies, and I somewhat agree, even though I'm not white. I'm only 12% European, but I'm not white. But however, I can kind of see where people are coming from, because back then they have selective bias for the past, even though a lot of those places you would just either die from disease, combat, or war, or just something else in general that you probably didn't have a big say in how you lived or anything you really do. Women even less. So ancient Greece, ancient Rome, you were probably going to be a slave and probably not a king. You probably not going to live very good. I'm just taking a wild guess. There wasn't, if you were born with a defect too, which probably happened during those days, you were, I don't know, I guess kind of screwed over, because what are you going to do about it? If you're, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, you were born with a disability, mentally, physically, emotionally. It was probably very hard for you if you got sick. There weren't modern doctors. There wasn't modern medicine. There wasn't modern technology. So you kind of just had to deal with it as best as you can, which maybe somewhat is today, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. So it's not really a problem. But back then, I think ancient Greece and ancient Rome, I was just gonna say life wasn't very good, and I think people misremember it more fondly than it actually was. I think people just get nostalgia. Not to say there weren't good times or bad times, maybe it was average, but I think the average citizen lives much better today than the average citizens of those times. Going to the Vikings, a lot of Vikings just pillaged each other, and they didn't get along particularly well with anyone either. So actually they didn't get along with each other, which is funny, because a lot of people will say, hey, look at all these past white societies that I guess essentially got along well together. And this isn't to harp on white people, because I think white people did the most for humanity outside of Jesus Christ. I've said that before. And I'll say that I think white people don't get enough credit for creating things that we all use. I don't think white people get enough credit for making life better for a lot of other people, and you have to ask the question if white societies and white countries was so bad along, white people, even if these places are so bad, why does everybody want to go there? Which I think is valid. But yeah, I don't think the Vikings were particularly nice to each other either. The Goths back then too, they converted to just Christianity, and I think a lot of the reason why that happened, a lot of people say, well, they converted due to the sword, which is fair. I think a lot of that is due to the sword, but I think a big part of it also is just that people converted to Christianity is because Jesus Christ. I think they didn't want to admit it, and maybe some still don't, is that Jesus Christ is a better God and Jesus Christ is a better man. He's a better human than any other human in existence, and he's a better God than any other God in existence, because Jesus Christ is God who became man, who reclaimed God, but he humbled himself and humiliated himself for our sake, and he loved everybody. He loves everybody. He hung out with the outcast. He said that non-believers, many of them would get into the kingdom before the Pharisees. The Pharisees thought they were self-righteous, but many were just self-righteous hypocrites that really didn't. They were just self-righteous hypocrites, and many of them, I think, they just weren't consistent with their own beliefs. They didn't practice what they preached. Basically, they weren't Christ-like. To me, that's the biggest thing. It's not about what people believe. It's not about what they think. It's not about what they say. And in some cases, it's not even about what they do. It's about how they behave, which I guess in some ways could be about what they do, but what they do, behaving Christ-like, I think is more important than believing in Jesus Christ even. And I'll say why. Jesus Christ already said in the scriptures, even subtly or passively, there's a reason why Jesus says to even non-believers that they'll get into the kingdom before others, because even if they didn't see Jesus Christ as the Messiah or God at the time, they still, dang, my head itches, they still believed in God. Well, actually, no, that's not true. Maybe they didn't believe in God, but they did believe in, see, how long do we have here? Actually, maybe I will stop after this. Dude, I'm getting kind of tired. But maybe it is the case. Okay, we have 5 minutes. Alright, I'm going to finish it up later in the day, probably. I can't do it, I'm too tired, but yeah. It's, behaving Christ-like is more important than being Christian. Many people who say they're Christian don't seem to be Christ-like. they fall into the self-righteous hypocrites that God himself, Jesus, said that many people probably shouldn't do. I also don't think God was unjustified or evil because he flooded the earth or he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, because both of those places were very bad. The people there were very wicked. I'm not going to describe what they did, but they did do the R word. They did it with women, the fallen angels, demons, devils. You know, they fell down from heaven and they did naughty things. Sodom and Gomorrah, they had people outside doing it, out in the middle of the street. And that was an everyday occurrence because people who try to justify or make their own values and morals can't really offer a justification without going in circles. And even saying something works, as I said before, doesn't actually mean anything because it's just an assertion. And by the impossibility of the contrary, free will in some cases has to be the case, even if it's limited free will, because you're assuming, claiming, and asserting things that don't actually match up to what you believe or what they believe. Oh yeah, I was going to do that. Okay, so very quickly, going back to a callback to the things, how the past was better. A lot of people, also white people especially, they have this misconception of Nazi Germany, but Hitler and Germany helped create the state of Israel, maybe, with something called the Havara Agreement, where it sent Jews to Palestine, and that could have helped create the modern state of Israel, which I wouldn't be surprised, which means Nazis and Hitler potentially could be controlled opposition by the Jews, so that people can have the illusion of choice or the illusion of a side when all sides it's all theater. And it's unfortunate because many people in politics and political positions, they worship anything that's not Jesus, and I don't think it's going to work because none of them can fulfill what Jesus did. Jesus is also, by most scholars, is an historical person due to many non-biased sources outside of the Bible, like Pliny the Younger, the Pontius Pilate letter, Josephus, Tacitus, the Annals, and many more. Many scholars, most historians, even non-believers, atheists, agnostics, believe Jesus of Nazareth did exist as a real person. And if you're going to say he's not, you would have to account for why history is real. You have to give an account for why you believe. Yeah, you know what? Okay, you know what? Let's go to the. I thought I was going to bed, but change of plans. I'm going to stay up. I'm going to try. And if people don't like it, well, that's too bad. I don't know if I should put some Jay Dyer or Andrew Wilson in the background. And, maybe I probably shouldn't, because I don't want to use their stuff without permission. And frankly, I think I've done a good enough explanation on my own. But I'll try to take a power nap, close my eyes, but still keep it going because I'm having a good time with this. So as I said before, oh yeah, wait, where was I going with this? Oh yeah. So that has to... So yeah, going back to the Nazi and Germany stuff and Hitler stuff, a lot of people would say, well, he's the great white hope. Not only not realizing that it's very inconsistent because Hitler himself wasn't exactly all there. I'm guessing some of his leaders, one of the persons had a shorter leg, a leg that was shorter than the other one. They were already disabled physically in some way. He sterilized you if you, the Nazis and Hitler, they sterilized you if you weren't useful to them. So I don't know where people get the idea that, oh well, Hitler, he cared about his own. It's like, yeah, he did, but only if you were useful to him. If you were a burden, he wouldn't give it a less than a second thought. Now I have my own thoughts about the Holocaust and stuff. I'm not going to get into it. I think there's some stuff that's very strange. But I won't probably get too much in depth with how I feel because even if I granted my opinion, it wouldn't change the fact that Nazi Germany and Hitler, they probably didn't care about their own white people as much as people think. Because as I said before, they not only sterilized their own, which were white people, Aryans, but what a lot of people also, I think, don't seem to understand is that Hitler did not like the Polish people. Polish people were white, and Hitler just killed them. He just ended them in war. And there was probably not, a big justification for him to do that. Maybe there was, but it's kind of hard to not find non-biased sources because everybody wants to be correct all the time in all ways, and it's like you can't really be correct in all ways, and you would still have to give a justification for how you know what correct means, if correct can't even be quantified or verified, because being correct is some sort of benchmark. It's some sort of standard that I don't think a lot of people can verify empirically. They can't even know, as I've said before, what good means, other than their preference, other than self-referencing. So because if you have one action or one thought that is no better than another action or another thought or another belief, because everything is equal due to the fact that everything is essentially cause and effect from something else, with no choice and with no ability to be anything prior, then you in some way have to say that it's just about which preference you have. Um, why is it's like kind of asking why is order better than chaos if order is not really a thing other than what people deem order to be good, which is fallacious, which is a appeal to consensus fallacy, because again it's just going back to what people prefer. And okay, I prefer all humans to be dead. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with all humans dying? You don't exist anymore, you don't have to suffer, and eventually you're going to just die anyway, because death is essentially your God. I'll just say it like this. If you worship anything, I think, other than a God who can give justification, can give grounding, logic, metaphysics, universals, can come in time and space, can have a relationship, a personal relationship, I don't see how you argue out of it or against it, because you're not really arguing anything of substantial. In fact, you can't even know that it's you arguing against it. You're just saying that, well, it's my preference and it makes me feel bad. Okay, that doesn't mean anything. You're just asserting that, well, I'm correct and I know what's better. It's like you don't know what that means, because there is no better in that word, in your worldview. In fact, there is no better objectively. It's just what you believe. It's just what you say. I think it's kind of ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous that people would even insinuate that, oh, I can say, everything is subjective, but we have an objective standard because we know what works and logic works, but everything that I'm saying and doing and can actually be validated because it's self-referencing to relativity, and it just comes down to what I like and don't like. That's why I do have my own problems with the transcendental argument. I think it works even on the higher level, not the normative level, because, as I said before, the transcendental argument tag is a very strong and powerful thing, because transcendental arguments, like every argument, every position, you could say is circular. That's what a presupposition is. A paradigm level critique is. Presupposition is that you assume something to be true, you claim it to be true, you argue for it to be true. So it's basically your worldview in every presupposition. I think you can't avoid circularity. So the deal breaker, the tiebreaker, is coherentism and something being consistent. Transcendental argument, while it may not necessarily prove God on its own, I don't think the reason why it's so strong is because it says, well, you use metaphysical things, you use stuff you can't physically or logically prove in a way that's under a microscope, but you still use them, you still argue with them, and people don't like that because a lot of times they have to look in the mirror. That's why Jay Dyer and Andrew Wilson are so good. It's because the best debaters, they don't argue with They don't get emotional. They don't argue with emotion. They don't care that other people can't see that what the opposition is essentially doing is an internal critique. They don't care about how much you whine and say, well, I don't like it, I don't prefer it. I don't care if I don't prefer it. I don't care. And I don't need to justify my own beliefs because to justify one's own beliefs means you have to give an account. Tag does it on a higher level than just the physical, than just the material, because you argue for things that perhaps your sense data can't account for in the same way, because it's kind of like this, right? You can just ask someone, well, is reality self-evident? You can't possibly know whether it is or isn't self-evident, but the fact that you're trying to appeal to just sense data when you've already claimed, that we can't ultimately know what's true, then it makes a lot of stuff what you say invalid, or it makes it very hard, if not impossible, to be able to debate correctly, or in a way that you can justify it without going into contradictions, because you're just saying, well, we use these things and they work. It's why the laws of identity, laws of logic, and even logic itself, you can say it's pragmatic, but the issue is that, again, what works is subjective and arbitrary from a certain standpoint, because most people in those worldviews that posit that we can't know anything outside of our own minds or experience, or we don't have to go into philosophy or having to justify our presuppositions, then it basically means that, like I said before, it basically means that everything someone says can't and won't be able to be it won't be able to be justified. So I can't hear the blizzard, but yeah, it's like people just, I don't know. I think that. So let's look at this. I do like these scenes on this video, even though it's basically blank. Well, I talked a lot about metaphysics. I talked about politics, theology. I talked a lot about justification. Um, so what else should I talk about? I guess I could talk about power scaling, perhaps for a while. So let's just get into power scaling a little bit. I am a power scaler somewhat. I've been like scaling stuff since like, well, I don't particularly remember, but I remember going on lounge forums back in 2014, and I would argue stuff about, like, I kind of stunk at it. I would put Bugs Bunny against Goku. This was back in like 2014, 2013. No, this was back when I had like a PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. So yeah, it was it's like 11 years ago. Actually, it might have even been in like 2012 actually, but this was before I knew about Seth and Webcam Parent and Six and Suakage and Noodles and Clyde the Weeaboo and Check the Cybercook and many more. Tilted FN, Toaster XD, and a lot more other power scaling YouTubers. I used to, anyway, so back in 2012 or something. Yeah, what I'll just say is back in 2012. Actually, it might have even been before that, because 2012 was when I started a volunteer job. So, and I'm still doing it now. But, so this was way back when I didn't know how to power scale or take feats. I would just kind of say stuff that wasn't very good or very consistent. So for example, I would say stuff like Bugs Bunny could beat Goku because he has Toon Force and Goku doesn't. Now I know that's probably not the case. I don't think Bugs Bunny has. Well, it depends on what Goku and what Bugs are talking about, and the feats and the context. But I would go with Bugs Bunny usually because I would just say something along the lines of Bugs Bunny wins because he has Toon Force and Goku doesn't. So Bugs Bunny wins because he can do things that Goku can't. And maybe in some ways that is true. You could argue Bugs Bunny could be a higher dimensional being in Duck Amuck, but Goku can get to Outerverse, higher layers if you use a Raleigh and argue a certain way about the cosmology of Dragon Ball. With Duck Amuck, with Bugs Bunny, you could just say, well, Toon Force is pretty strong, but it doesn't work on characters like Beerus or Goku, because Goku was able to, in just his blue form, and this is earlier in the Dragon Ball Super series, that Goku was able to stall Arale in blue form, and Beerus was able to erase Dr. Slump from the creation. And the reason why this is significant, because Arale and Dr. Slump are able to run backwards in time. Goku scales to her. Probably I would say scales higher. But either way, Goku, at least in blue form, early in the series, is able to match Arale. At least making him on the same tier in durability, AP, attack potency, destructive capability, strength, and so on. Goku was able to fight as at least a hyperversal character because Arale was able to transcend her dimensions, infinite dimensions, infinitely over and over and over again. And because she's able to go above her own multiverse numerous times, she would just be up there numerous times. There's also, you could just say she scales that way due to something called dimensional tiering. Dimensional tiering has to do with cosmology and stuff, which is why when people argue, and before I get into irrelevant versus boundless and stuff, I think if you use Duck Amuck, I think you can get Bugs Bunny to 4D, if not hyper, if not higher, because Bugs Bunny was able to manipulate all of reality, and all of reality could mean something like from something like the observable universe to something to all reality could mean all things in existence, the cosmology. It could go to how for example, you could say, because depending on, because cosmology size matters, because if you have two characters that you could argue have the same feats, have the same strength, do a lot of roughly similar same stuff, and you can highball them or wank them into tiers that are beyond what at least they've shown, because you can be higher than what a feat shows, then you could just you could imply that an irrelevant character and a boundless character and characters that break the speed formula, irrelevant speed, you can't really apply L of no infinities. You can't apply speed equals distance divided by time and divided by distance, because irrelevant speed means you can be in multiple places at once, not due to your presence but due to your speed. So if you wanted to be in the past, present, and future at once, and you wanted to be in another dimension while being in a completely different time period or time space, that would be irrelevant speed, because it wouldn't make sense from a standpoint. It's the same with irrelevant and boundless characters. At least with Outerverso, you can just say Outerverso characters are still in some ways limited by just very, very high math of infinities, Aleph nodes, Aleph cardinals, Aleph sets. But if you want to, say that to a boundless character or a relevant character or an extraverso character, you could say that now, or metafictional or extra fictional, higher fictional character. I would say that boundless is still underneath a metafictional character and an irrelevant character, because Boundless, people say, oh well, there's still there's there are Boundless is above the Turing system, but that can't be the case necessarily all the time, because you're still being bounded by the Turing system, even if you say it's not. However, if you want to go multiple layers into Boundless, I guess you could have a case. But then it's like, well, if you have two Boundless characters, and they're essentially unlimited in any fictional way that at least math and any affinities could perceive, do, or perceive, or calculate, how do you infer which Boundless character is more impressive than any other? Well, I think it just has to go into cosmology. It has to go into theories and theoretical stuff that you can't calculate, because you kind of have to go into make-believe stuff. You have to go into real life, I think, cosmology, because at some point you can't measure a character in the same way that you would measure a universe character. How do you calculate a character who in some ways is not bound by the fiction that they're in? But here's why I put irrelevant characters above. Here's why I put fictional characters above characters that aren't. I put irrelevant characters due to the fact that I think irrelevant characters, at least in speed-wise, are the highest speed tier. So if you can't calculate that's already, I think, a good start. Also, another reason why is because Boundless can have multiple layers into it. So boundless layers upon boundless layers of many infinities of Boundless onto itself. However, irrelevant would just break it, because you're not even held back by infinities. I mean, you're above the infinity of infinities, of boundless infinities, and so it's irrelevant, because you can't even apply you can't apply logic to it in a way that the human mind can understand or calculate. So I think irrelevant is higher. I think I think God Fusion Goku, you could say, is either boundless, or if you say, and the reason why God Fusion Goku, I put God Fusion Goku can either go into the boundless layer, because if you say that Goku is a metafictional character in some way that transcends itself fiction, you could just say that God Fusion Goku fuses with the audience, but not in a literal way that would be above himself, because Goku caused the chairs to shake, which is very impressive. It's more impressive than Cosmic Armor Superman, or even Deadpool, killing the author, because Deadpool interacting with the audience or author, it doesn't mean he pops out of the fiction and comes at you. It's same thing with Cass. The most thing he did was beat Mandrake and felt the the reader breathing on the pages. And so, it's not a bad those aren't bad feats, but those pair in comparison to causing the actual real life chairs to shake. That means God Fusion Goku was able to, in some ways, affect the real life audience. But if you want to take it a step further, and I guess potentially wank off Goku, God Fusion Goku, you could just say that God Fusion Goku can be wanked to irrelevant and metafictional, because if you take it to its utmost, God Fusion Goku would actually see fiction as fiction, and you would be literally fused with the audience. I think God Fusion Goku, if you take it to his utmost, that's why I say God Fusion Goku is one of the most powerful Gokus I think we've seen. I think God Fusion Goku is above, Xenoverse Goku. I think God Fusion Goku is above Jump Force Goku. God Fusion Goku, I would say, is above CC Goku. God Fusion Goku, if you take it up to its utmost and you would say, well, fiction is, how we see fiction as fiction, which even irrelevant characters in fiction, I don't think can compare to irrelevant in real life, because irrelevant characters in fiction and metafiction and boundless still have to have real life to exist, even in those infinite layers of boundless layers upon irrelevancy, because irrelevant means that everything is irrelevant except to itself. So you can't even calculate what it means, because it's just logic and reason and math and measurement and science and words, and even reality itself, I don't think is able to describe what it means to be irrelevant. And that's why I think so then if I come to the conclusion that irrelevance is higher than boundless due to the statements I made earlier, what about an irrelevant character versus an irrelevant character? Because I think if you are irrelevant, you're either omnipotent, which might not even exist in fiction because of not only, I think, contradictions, but of the fact that, there's probably fiction that you don't know about because it doesn't get published, and then you would have to kind of prove that fiction is affected by any other fiction, a la SCP or Word of Darkness, which I think might be the most powerful. But before I go into that spiel of who I think would be better or who would win, and if somebody told me, if I put an irrelevant character versus another irrelevant character, and I put them against each other, who would win? And I just respond with, well, it's irrelevant. Now, I would say it's irrelevant because you're not playing by the same rules anymore, if there are any rules anymore. You can't calculate really anything from a logical standpoint. you can't really be consistent. It's too hard for the human mind to comprehend. I think it's just not worth it because I think you would have to then go into cosmology, but maybe even cosmology is irrelevant because if both things and both characters are irrelevant to where you can't even calculate it, it evolves into basically make believe, or you have to go into real life stuff. Now, Seth the programmer did say that boundless characters, if you had one boundless character versus another boundless character, how would you determine who wins? And he basically, he said, and I agree with him, he said, you basically have to chalk it up to make believe, or if you had to choose, you would essentially have to say that a character versus another boundless character, they would a boundless character versus another boundless character, it just comes down to cosmology and which one's bigger. And I think that's the only way you can actually do it, because otherwise you're almost diving into nonsensical stuff. You're going into you're moving away from fiction into real life reality, real life irrelevancy in some ways. And then it's like kind of like who sort of has the bigger dick. And the reason why that doesn't, I don't think, flies with me is because that if you state or say that if you state or you say that if you state that one character can be another character, either if they're both boundless or both irrelevant, then it just goes into imagination, and you're kind of just stuck at making up your own interpretations of things that you might not be able to qualify or quantify in a way that can't happen without a cosmology. So I think who wins is basically whose cosmology can be proven bigger. I think that's the only way to do it. So it's like, well, which one is better than the because, as I said before, which character would beat another, like which nonsensical character would be another nonsensical character? I'm not so sure omnipotent exists in fiction in the way people think it does. This is due to the fact that a lot of stuff can't be calculated in a way that is that is consistent with itself or others. So, I guess for my last thing, uh, because we're running out of time, and I'm pretty dang tired. I need to go to bed. But it's been fun. But yeah, it would go based on the I think cosmology. I think it would basically have to come down to cosmology. So now I'm wondering. So I thought about it, and I had to think about it. Based on my research, it would either come down to I am from the Word of Darkness versus the meta normalcy from SCP. Now, I'm going to give two answers: the composite one and the non-composite one. If it's non-composite, I think it's a tough matchup, but I think I am from the Word of Darkness would beat out the SCP the normal one, the canon one, because it doesn't have the composite cosmology. It doesn't have as much backing based on the research I've done. I've heard it gets pretty dang close. It's kind of white. It's kind of like the white light from those novels. That the white light is basically Jesus Christ in those novels. But I think, barring that aside, the Word of Darkness, and I am would beat the SCP. Now, if it's composite SCP, then I think the meta normalcy wins, because the SCP is composite. Apparently, it has quite a bit bigger cosmology than the Word of Darkness, and I think the Word of Darkness can't take on composite SCP. I think composite SCP might be the strongest verse in all of fiction, due to how insane and absurd it is. You can't really calculate it, and I think a lot of people underestimate the SCP. So I think composite SCP is the top, then it goes Word of Darkness, then it goes normal SCP, then perhaps the other fictional universes and fiction. Because both the meta-normacy from SCP and the I am from Word of Darkness, basically, they're just stand-ins for the avatar of God. Kind of like the stand-in for Jesus. But the last thing I'll point out is that even if I grant everything, let's say a character that is irrelevant in fiction versus a real life character, a real life version of like Jesus, who is omnipotent, irrelevant in real life. It would be like an irrelevant a relevant person or being that is stuffed to the same extent as an irrelevant character from fiction is. It's like saying who would win between the real life Jesus versus a Jesus that is portrayed as a fictional character avatar. It's like the avatar for Jesus in real life is a much different entity than the avatar than non-real life. Because a character so a character so what was I gonna say? Alright, I'll do this later, maybe some other time. So, a character that dude, what the heck? Again, my throat's getting weird. So a character that is parched. No, my throat's parched. What the freak? Okay, so a character that's irrelevant, that can't be calculated, and that is an avatar of Jesus and is supposed to be Jesus in all of his glory, can't even come close to the glory of Jesus Christ in his human form in real life, Jesus of Nazareth. And even Jesus' avatar, which I believe it is, it's still Jesus due to kenosis and all that. But Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, or even the Psychology of Jesus by Carl Jung, all of those pale in comparison to the Jesus that is in. They all felt they fail in comparison to Jesus that you can't actually compare to not really much of anything. It fails in comparison to the real form of God. And I'll give Gnosticism some credit for that, is that they say God is unknowable, it's the monad, it's not the demiurge, because a lot of people think that the God of the Old Testament is the demiurge who's evil, though I have my contention with that, as I've highlighted before in this video. The monad, the demiurge, God, I believe God can't. If Jesus Christ isn't God, then I think God is basically unknowable. And Jesus Christ, the real life avatar, not the psychology one, not the fictional one, the real life avatar of Jesus, who is God in human form, cannot be even compared to his true form. And even the human form, people can't really calculate. That's why Jesus is not only cool, but Jesus Christ is very intelligent in ways that we can't even fathom. So when people try to put limits on God and say, well, God can't do this, God can't make a square circle, God can't make 2 plus 2 equals 5, God can't make an unmarried bachelor. And I say, God can, we just can't comprehend it, we just can't understand it. For example, Jesus Christ himself is a married bachelor. Jesus Christ is both single and Jesus Christ is also married to the church. So the contradiction is squared by that circle by God being able to be single in a way and being married in a different way. Just because God can do things that we can't understand or measure doesn't mean God can't do them. And I think it's very weird that people would put limits on God when they themselves already concede to themselves that we already have limits, or that we can't understand or know God completely in the first place. Anyway, that was my live stream reaction to very good videos. I thought this was a very good video. I think one of my best videos ever, because I thought it was very knowledgeable, and sometimes I went off longer, I rambled, but I felt that it was very good and it was very mesmerizing. Anyway, thanks for whoever watches this, thanks for watching. And you can talk if you want. We can perhaps hang out or do something. Anyway, Meachew out.